Hey, we're the Greeting Committee.
Hanging out with Rob on Front Row Live.
Let's talk about that debut album and what was the creative process behind it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's our first record, so it's been a collective for the past 4 years since we started as a band, and then we've got some newer material on that as well. And we sat down with writers for the first time, and they kind of helped us formulate, what we wanted to do and how to make a cohesive piece.
And what was that like, getting together with brand new people in the studio, like a co-writer, for example, and it's just like starting to spill your life out, like, with strangers?
It was good because we got to allow each other to have room to grow individually, and then, take whatever ideas we each brought in individually and then make it a group effort. So it was good.
Now, for you guys, as far as like the instrumentation and stuff goes, what was that creative process like for you guys?
With having an extra person in the room for some of the songs, it was nice to kind of have someone like filter all of our ideas, where you want to be stepping on like someone else's idea while like you're working with each other, and then you could kind of let each other breathe, because this person's kind of like, I don't know, kind of directing where like we can put all of our ideas. So that was really nice. And then a lot of other songs that we kind of did on our own was, I think a lot of them was just bringing in individual ideas into like whatever demo process or just writing process that we're having, and then everyone else just slowly kind of formed their ideas around whatever idea that we had going, and then shaped it a little bit. And then it's pretty much a team effort the entire way through for instrumentals.
What producers did you guys work with, and like how did you guys feel like they kind of like helped you guys out in the studio?
His name's Andrea Tokic. He's based in Nashville at a studio called The Bomb Shelter. We actually like vibed with him really well. Yeah. Actually, like we were on the same page with him for like almost all of his ideas for like production and like textures and like stuff like that.
You would also just change like small stuff like transitions in songs. Like, hey, it would be cool maybe if you held this chord and then came in on like the and of one or something like that, and just like small like little pieces that just kind of made the music sound a little bit more fluid when listening back to it. So he helped a lot with that. And then his sound, he has a very unique sound with production, and I think it comes in through the record.
Right. What was it about this producer that you guys wanted to jump in the studio with him?
Yeah, I think Andre had a really like natural sound. That's something we really wanted to go for. He, I guess some of his like biggest work was Alabama Shake's first record, and so kind of taking our poppier music and doing more of like a bluesy, I guess even like kind of country sound to it. We want to
a little bit like Americana too, right?
Definitely. I mean, we demoed like all of the songs before, and there's a lot of different elements to each song, but be able to take those like analog instruments rather than like, we didn't want to use like computers. Nice. So it's like all like real instruments, and he did a really good job with that.
So in doing so, like, how did you feel challenged like in the studio? Because like there was no, if you made a mistake, you got to start all over again. So, what was that like?
That's why I'm not a studio person. I think the guys like the studio a lot more than I do. I hate it because it's so much pressure. We had 10 days to record 12 songs for our first record, which is very difficult. And so for me, for vocals, I feel a lot of pressure because if I get sick and I wipe out, I could wipe out those whole 10 days. Or if I'm just not having a good vocal day, those happen too, where you wake up and you're like, I just don't sound good today. And so kind of deciding, waking up that day and seeing what can I tackle and what can I not tackle, that was definitely a challenge I faced.
Tell me a little more about the writing process with this album. Like, what kind of inspired the tracks on this record?
Lyrically, it's a coming-of-age story, and that's simply because we're all young, and that's all we've known and been working towards. I'm interested to see what direction we go for the next record, but for this one, that's definitely the tie that comes in. I would say that there were other opportunities for other songs to come into play, but at the end of the day, we wanted to make a cohesive piece, and lyrically, the songs that we chose were what fit that narrative the best.
Now, when I first put the record on, the first track, This Is It. Is this it? Yeah. I like how you guys kind of switched out with the title too, by the way.
It was, I wanted the record to be called Is This It? And then someone was like, that's the name of the Strokes' first record. And I was like, we're going to change it slightly then. And so that's what we did. But it's Is This It in my heart. So you're basically right.
All right. So, listening to the first track, that's where I really fell in love with the whole thing. I was just like, it's like the perfect starter track.
Thank you.
I like how you guys kind of floated, all the tracks in the record. How did you guys go about as far as like numbering the tracks and putting them where they went?
That was actually, we debate about is this it being like the first one, because I think me and him did not want that track to be the first song on the record, and then I don't know, you did. I don't know if Pierce did.
At first, I wanted it to be the last song, and then
it was beginning or the end.
Yeah.
Track order wise though, I think we like it was a mix of thinking about instruments and like also the narrative of her lyrics and her story. So I think track order wise, I'm trying to think of it because I don't. I think we kind of try to keep stuff like energy wise, like if you had songs that had similar tempos, try not to keep those all in the same spot, or like the energy of the instrument. Yeah, if like something's a very high energy song, probably try not to put like 5 of those back to back in the same order. But like, do you want to talk about that narrative wise?
Yeah, Is This It? What I like about that song, that's a perfect example of where working with a writer came into play in a really good way.
Okay.
Because Pierce actually brought in that saxophone, that dun 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 dun, dun, and I love that, and I think it's so catchy. But if we hadn't had the writer with us, I don't know if that would have, kept going.
Right. You don't think that track would have existed at all, or just that saxophone part?
Well, the saxophone part is what started that track. So that track at all, really, the lyrics actually come from a song we wrote when we had just started. So I was like 16. So the chorus is new, but those verse lyrics are older, which I really love that lasted through the years of us being a band. But yeah, I don't know if that saxophone part would have, or that song would have been a thing.
How it was like an hour, 40 minutes to do just like the instrumental for you. So it was like whatever was there at that time came out. So if we didn't do it in that moment, then that probably wouldn't have been an instrumental at all.
Sounds like that was like a challenging song to like really create. Was that the most challenging one?
No, I think it was actually easy. Now I'm hoping that we've learned that through the writer to not squash each other's ideas. But for you, was it difficult to write that?
It was. I think at the time we were all kind of like in a rut. We were all together for like a week straight, and it's just like, what do you want to write next? And so I was like, let me put out the saxophone, and I think Kennedy put on some drum loop, and I played along to it, and it was actually really seamless how like quick it came about. Like you came up with the lyrics. It was just like we did not really think about it a lot, and it made it easier. Like I don't know what songs, like 17, we probably thought about that one a bunch. Just like, oh, what should we do? Do we want to go in the poppier direction with that? But with that one, with Is This It? It's just like, let's just write a song, and like it was really seamless. It was nice.
Right. You mentioned like Andrea came from like working with Alabama Shakes, for example. But is that did you guys come into this record saying like we want to go towards that bluesy direction before you guys worked with Andrea, or is that like it just happened because you guys started working with him?
I think, Brandon had picked Andrea as our producer based on what he wanted the record to sound like production-wise, and I think that reflects what we appreciate in music. I couldn't tell you if I'm going to have a future project or not that's outside of the greeting committee, but I know that for the greeting committee, one thing that's very important to me is that what you see on stage, if you hear something, you can see someone play it, and that the sounds are going to be authentic sounds that come from an instrument. That doesn't mean we won't dabble in synthesizers or whatever, but even then, it's going to be something that we're playing, because I just think that that's, the art of music, and I think that's something that's getting lost as we go into the future, which, has, can be a great thing, and you want to embrace change as much as you can, but also appreciate, at the end of the day, what music is.
Right. I like that. Now, as far as like the live show, how does the live show kind of compare to like the recording?
I feel like we try to make them like hand in hand as close as we can. Obviously, it's not, because like in the studio, you're adding a bunch of different layers. Like we'll have a bunch of different keyboards and stuff kind of supporting the bottom, or like strings and horns and stuff that we can't always do live. But like we try to keep it as close as possible, because a lot of this record is like we did as much live tracking together as a band as we could. So a lot of the bed tracks is what they would call it. So it's like drums, guitar, and bass are all recorded live. Okay. So it was kind of like just performing like our live set inside of a studio. So trying to get that as close as possible, but less layers, I guess.
Yeah, one thing that this record has changed for our live shows a lot is like background vocals.
Yeah.
All us guys are trying to learn how to sing now, because there's all these vocals on the record. So that's been kind of a challenge, but a good thing though.
How did you guys do the backup vocals with the actual recording process? Is that?
We had hired musicians for that. That came in studio, and they were wonderful. We used some like hired musicians for strings, horns, and background vocals for this record, and like that was an interesting process, because we have never worked with anyone outside of the band up to this point. So having like new musicians come and play with us on the records was a lot of fun, especially stuff you can't do. And then you're like, yeah, sick. Now that's on our music. That's dope.
So what's that like as you guys are kind of like preparing for live shows and stuff, like, and you guys are trying to figure out the whole backup vocals situation? Like, how's that been like?
It's been kind of challenging.
It's a
I mean,
process.
yeah, for like obviously all the strings and horns, like we can't have those when we like go on the road, just because like we can't afford that.
Not yet.
Yeah. Not hopefully one day, but like for our hometown show that we're having November 10th, we're gonna have all these hired volunteered strings and horn players and background vocalists, and it'll be tons of fun. I'm excited for it.
And we've actually after we recorded the record, we're like, shoot, how are we gonna play all these live with just the four of us? So we ended up bringing our friend Noah Spencer on the road with us, just like a good friend who lived and kind of grew up in Kansas City with us, to help recreate a lot of those sounds. And like Austin was saying about, we have our big like album release show we're doing in Kansas City with all these other musicians, but that's not going to be a super common occurrence like at the moment. So having the five of us.
In other words, you guys don't want to miss that show.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how the greeting committee shows should sound. So we had our rehearsal, and it was like mind-blowing. I walked out of there with like tears in my eyes because I was like, this is how it's supposed to be. But the guys sound great on everything, but it's not. Those are hired women background vocalists on the studio. So I would love to bring in like.
So you guys are stuck with higher pitches. Like, is that what it is? Like, is that what the challenge is?
And they try to learn. So I have an awesome vocal instructor who's also like my life coach. His name is Randy Schott, and he's actually one of the background vocalists for our Kansas City show, which will be a really special thing for us. But he tries to help them in arrangements and like what's going to work for you. And one thing that I like about it is now that they all have to do it, they can see how hard it is to sing and play, because they used to give me flack about it all the time. I'm like, it's a very difficult thing to do. It's like rubbing your stomach and patting your head times 1,000. And I say, I want people to be comfortable. If you can't sing something, let's figure it out. I'm not going to try to make a sound come out of you that just is not possible. But it is cool watching how far they can go. Austin takes lessons pretty regularly with Randy, and it's been really cool to see his development and how good he's gotten. And I can see, my journey through him, and I can look back and say, I remember how difficult that was. Like, I promise it gets better, or like, you can do this, versus like, no, you probably can't do that yet, but we'll get there.
Right. And then we, I think we've toured, I guess, around like 3 months since putting out or recording the album. So, and doing it with just 5 people has been really interesting. It's, I think you can put out a fun show, even though we don't have all those layers. And it ends up being more of like a kind of like a more punk rock show, and that like I'll still play like saxophone for the parts that have horns on it, and then I'll give my bass to Noah. But I think we do still like play a little bit stripped down versions of it that are still interesting to see.
Right. There's a lot of moving parts. You don't really think about it until like you're actually getting ready for a show.
Well, and I think it's fun because also then we have songs where Austin plays piano as well, but Brandon also plays drums. So it's cool because we get to switch around and then kind of show off like, hey, we can do more than just our assigned role per se. And that's an opportunity we only get because we don't have the budget to bring out other people.
It's just making you better musicians.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it ultimately is.
The challenge, exactly.
So tell me a little bit about Hands Down. When that song dropped, that kind of gave you guys a little bit of attention, on radio and, throughout the world, I would assume. Like, how did that impact you guys in the way that you started to write music afterwards?
Well, that was kind of our wake-up call of, okay, wow, we could do something with this, which I always thought, ever since I was younger, I was like, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to be an artist. There's no other way for me. And then it happened, and you're like, wow, okay. I'm glad that I, spoke that out into existence, but it definitely made us grow up. It's different the way we used to write just for fun versus when you're writing to have a career and you want songs that people are going to like that are also genuine to who you are and what you like. So it's definitely been something we're learning. I feel like 4 years later, we're just now kind of figuring it out.
You could see like kind of the steps between our first EP, which was like us in high school, then the second EP, which is still kind of us in high school, but with like a little bit bigger budget to kind of create these songs. And then this album we put out is like us maturing and like our songwriting process. It still, I think, shows our personality and like our more or less unique style, but No, I think it's interesting to see those like the different steps in our kind of development.
I haven't seen any like angry tweets of like, oh my God, they sold out, or like, who are they anymore? I think it's more people being like, okay, this is what they've been trying to do. We can see that now, which is nice, but.
Which is why you wait to release an album until you kind of figure out your sound. So I think you guys did it right.
And looking back, I remember I was so angry when, you know, I didn't want to do our second EP. I was like, I want to do the record now, because I always have this fear after we put something out. I'm like, what if I never write anything better? And looking back, I'm like, thank God I kept writing, because that's not even that good looking back at it. But it would have been crazy to put out that first record back when we put out the second EP. And I'm so glad that we waited and took the time. And it's a process of a lot of steps. And, you know, being in the industry now, learning everyone you thought blew up, artist-wise, I mean, there's like a backstory of years and years. Yeah, and you have no idea when you're outside of it. It's just when you get on the inside that you hear those stories, and it's comforting and makes me feel like we do have time and to do this the right way.
I just had a realization to that yesterday, actually, because there's this band today that's like getting a lot of attention, Bad Flower. You guys familiar?
I've actually, I've heard that band name.
They've recently started to get like TV attention and stuff like that, and I'm like, I don't know why that guy's name sounds familiar. I don't know why that band's name sounds familiar. Sure enough, I interviewed them in like 2014 because they had like a single out that I really liked. So it's like, you never know like when, you know, how long these bands or projects are actually like doing stuff.
Sometimes if it's a new project, though, it's like someone that was in another band for like 5 years beforehand or something like that, and just made a new project, then that project went off.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and a huge reason why we ended up, we met with, one of the things that hands down brought to us was the opportunity to sit down with a lot of record labels, which was something that was so cool. I was looking through my phone and like passed the photos of us all in New York at Times Square at like 3 a.m. the other day. And like, that's so fun to have those memories. But why we ultimately chose Harvest Records was because they made us feel like they were going to give us the room to grow and to have a career, as opposed to the pressure of, you need to do this now and this needs to sell like, you know, this many, and you need to get a platinum record and it needs to be this. They were like, no, we want you to have a dedicated fan base. We want you to do this the right way, to put out the good music, to put out at the right time, and the marketing plan, and, you know, all that goes into it. And so we're very fortunate to have put out our first record with them and have that opportunity.
Right, that's awesome. Now, you guys also got to share the stage. I think you guys actually went on tour with a friend of mine, Chloe from Kitten.
Oh my God,
so,
yes.
like, what was that experience like? Because she's a crazy, like, their show is just insane, and she's just a crazy, like, performer. So how did that kind of inspire you guys moving forward, you know, when you guys go out and perform?
I think like it was pretty much every single, I don't know how long we were on tour with them, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, but it was like constantly every single night you would pretty much see the same show of like that energy is always up here, that high, always going that hard no matter what. And like some days obviously like she wouldn't be feeling as well on certain days, but like you would expect the same show every single night going to see Kitten. And it's pretty much that consistency of like putting in a high performance or high energy interactive show all the time. Right. I think just keeping that threshold high and trying to hit that mark every single night.
Also unbelievable with her fans, and it's so genuine and so fun to watch, and that's something that we learned. We always go to the merch table after our set, after the headlining band set, whatever it is, and that's something
or not a compliment, advice from them directly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's paid off, and not even like to benefit us in a business way, just the fact that we've gotten to know so many great people because of that, and form friendships with people who support us, and that's something that we learned directly from her, and that high energy thing, because, you know, we've played plenty of shows. Even now on the last tour we went on, there was a show we played in Louisville, Kentucky with Jukebox the Ghost, and we all felt, they're so great. We all felt so weird before we were going on. We were like, this is going to be like off. It's just like not going to be right. Like,
this is going to be a bad show. Like all of us felt horrible. Like, it's going to be a bad show. And it was the best show of the tour. Best show of the tour.
It was so fun. Like the crowd interaction, just like the energy. It was just a very fun show. And so that was kind of my wake up call to be like, okay, no matter what, we need to be giving our best performance.
Yeah. You don't know how a set's going to be until you're halfway through it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. Congratulations on the debut album.
Thank you.
You guys be sure to check out The Greeting Committee. The new album is out now, and it's called
This Is It.
Thanks for watching here on Front Row Live.